There are several interventions that have been taken by the government, and this afternoon we'll be hearing about that from the horse's mouth. The CS in charge of the National Treasury will be presenting this budget statement before Parliament today. It has been debated for the last few days, and of course you know the contents. We'll be looking at that content, the content of that budget right here on the white table. My name is Ken Njuguna. This afternoon I am joined by the very own businessman on the desk, Noah Kipkemboi. He'll be doing some business today, and definitely he knows the facts and the figures more than me, but I'll be here to try and help. Apart from them, we'll be joined by a host of experts and guests who know one or two things about the budget. They'll be breaking it down to the last coin, the 3.6 trillion budget. But we are not alone in this coverage this afternoon. We'll be showing you the figures as they are. We'll be telling you where the government will be spending and where there are cuts, where there are taxes, and where there are a lot of complaints. All that will come out of this table. But apart from us on the white table and the guests will be joining here, we have our reporters across the country. Will Lusige will be joining us, Clement Masombo, Tobias Chanji. But right about now, Noah Kipkemboi is here with me. We have Emmanuel To, and of course, Chris Sairu from Parliament. We'll be speaking to them. But let me first take it to the businessman. What do you expect this afternoon? I hope this guy will be right on time this afternoon, you know?
Yeah.
President William Ruto is a stickler for time.
I know.
Yes.
I've realized, Ken, that when a new administration comes, actually the issue becomes you sort of establish a culture as you come in, but the thing is that that fades away slightly, and we've realized in recent government functions that issue of time, it's an issue. So I don't know, but you know what, the man of the moment, that is Professor Njuguna Ndung'u. Many people don't know the Sospita name. Do you know what that name means, Ken?
Sospita, it could be his middle name.
Exactly.
I mean,
his middle
name
name.
On first name basis, I don't know. I only see him on television.
Exactly. We know him as Professor Njuguna Ndung'u, and he's quite an experienced public figure. Served as the central bank, the 8th CBK governor between 2007 and 2015. So he has experience when it comes to public service. But now he's transitioning from matters monetary policy, where we was handling at the CBK, and it's moving now to the fiscal policy in Treasury. So seeing a man who's transitioned from one side to the other is quite interesting, and you understand the nature of this budget for the financial year 2023-2024. The challenges the country is in, the issue of debt, and every public servant can say that we have to pay the price. It's going to be a little bit painful for every Kenyan, but it will be worthwhile in the long run.
And that's the biggest question, because a head of state, Noah, ordinarily would not want to be the face of the suffering of Kenyans, but he's taken this head on. He's the one promoting it. Yesterday he was in Naivasha, actually, where he made a case yet again for this financial bill 2023. By all means, yesterday there was also a shift. Is it for the first time that we see someone sitting in the majority side voting with the minority side, and several from the minority side voting for the government side? What does this mean going forward? Are we likely to see a parliament that actually implements the ideology of independence?
I mean, Ken, this is one of the interesting discussions we've seen with this particular situation, because the president has been categorical, even openly putting it, that we will see those who will vote against this bill. And I've seen a lot of people from the minority side saying that is tantamount to threats of some sort. Yes. But I see it as some sort of accountability system. Remember, for you to run as a government, for you as an executive, it's very important for you to have a supportive house. And what he's saying is that I need to get your unequivocal support to make sure my vision is achieved no matter the cost. And that's what we're saying with this particular government.
Of course, there's a lot that comes out this afternoon, Noah. We'll be breaking it down, and we have a host of reporters across the country right now taking views from Kenyans, what they feel. But the bigger picture, as we sit here this afternoon, is this the inaugural budget of President William Ruto has been supported and also condemned in equal measure. Yes. Well, the tills, we can see the balance is on one side, but at the end of the day, the government must purpose to work. Let me ask you a hypothetical question. It's never happened. Being a business reporter, what happens if this budget collapses on the floor of the House? I know the bill cannot be reintroduced until 6 months later. So what happens during this period?
Now, that's an interesting question, because, I mean, that certainty that the government needs to have is what we've seen with the strategy with this government. First of all, controlling the House. And for you as a government, for you to sort of carry out your vision, Ken, you have to have that support. That's why we're seeing even the numbers yesterday, the balance, even those who are missing in the House. If at all they will have shown up and voted against it, the bill will still have some way gone through.
Okay.
So I think there is that buffer.
It is almost a half.
It's almost a half,
yes.
which is quite interesting. And even condemning people, MPs who didn't show up, saying some had, appointments with their lawyers and whatnot. It's quite interesting. But Ken, the probability of this collapsing is a little bit difficult, but next Tuesday, the third reading is where the interesting bit is, because they're going close by close,
yes.
and debating that.
There are about 80
clauses.
Yes.
So that will be where Kenyans need to pay attention, those nitty-gritties.
Which one passes and which one does not pass.
Exactly.
All right, very interesting, because there's a lot that is happening this afternoon. But first off, I guess we have to break down the figures, because the figures never lie. So let's begin with the hustlers budget, and the total amount of money that they're putting into this basket is about 3.6 trillion shillings. Now this is unprecedented, but times have changed, and definitely the amount of money has changed. So the total amount of budget for President William Ruto's inaugural kitty is 3.6 trillion shillings that is going into this budget to finance everything they want to do, both recurrent and of course development. The recurrent expenditure in this budget stands at about 1.4 trillion shillings. Almost half of the GDP is going to recurrent expenditure. But that's not all, because development is key. I mean, we have to make infrastructure that enables the growth in the country, that spurs the growth, so that everyone who is investing at least has some returns based on the investment that the government puts out there, because that's the core mandate of the government. So for development, the government is taking 714 billion shillings. Now, you'll realize something with this figure later on, because this is almost the amount of deficit that the government has in terms of this budget, a total of 3.6 trillion shillings. The expenditure is about, the revenue is about 2.1 trillion shillings. The deficit stands at about 720. So that is almost a development. So if you ask a question that I should have asked Noah, what happens today? Is it the government will have to compromise this development money, or they'll have to get the deficit from somewhere? So apart from that, let's look at the total deficit that I mentioned, 720. It's almost the same amount of money that goes to the development. But this is not all. Let's see what next we have in this budget, because there's a lot of figures today. So you ask yourself this afternoon, how is this money going to be split? Let's begin with the national government, by far the biggest spender in this economy, a total of 2.16 trillion. By far more than half of the 3.6 trillion is going to finance the national government operations. Parliament is going to take 40.4 billion shillings. That is Parliament. But let's see, how much is the judiciary taking? Because the judiciary is actually asking for more money from the national government. Now, the judiciary is taking 22.99 billion shillings, about 23 billion shillings. Development are all those. Remember, it's a separate arm of the government that has to deal with its own finances. And the county government just takes under 400 billion shillings in this budget. Let's see what else we have in this budget that is of significance to you this afternoon, because the national debt, which is very important, and pay attention to the national debt related to the budget ceiling. The national debt is 9.6 trillion shillings. The government has a small space of 400 billion shillings to continue borrowing. So the debt ceiling as set by Parliament is 10 trillion shillings. That's the maximum amount of money that the government can borrow. But there is an interesting fact about that, because Parliament passed only 2 trillion shillings that can be borrowed by the government. Almost 6 trillion shillings has been borrowed. So how did they borrow that money? Good question that the panel is answering this afternoon. And of course, there's a leeway for 400 billion, as I mentioned, and the budget deficit is 720 billion shillings. Now, apart from having the facts and the figures here, the men and the women who are passing this budget are getting ready to go to Parliament to listen to the CS in charge of the National Treasury. And our men on the ground, Chris Tairo and Emmanuel To, are holding fort for us. Let's cross over to Parliament now and speak to Chris Tairu, who is on standby. Chris, very good afternoon to you. And of course, you've been hearing sentiment from a lot of members of parliament and the public concerning this budget, which is one said to be very ambitious. It's going to have a huge deficit that has to be paid. But from where you're hearing this from, what are the men and women saying?
Coming to you live from Parliament buildings. It is a big day for the Republic of Kenya and indeed the East African countries, noting that this is their big day as their CSs or the Ministers for Treasury deliver their budgets. And here in Kenya, it is a big day for the Kenya Kwanza regime as they deliver their first budget under the 2023-2024 financial year. Last night, we saw that members of the National Assembly approved and passed the finance bill, which is now at the committee of the whole house and then the third reading. But yesterday it passed successfully at the second reading, and members who supported that bill were 176 compared to those who were against were 81. And anytime from now in the next 30 minutes or so, we should be expecting the CS for Treasury, Professor Njuguna Ndung'u, to make his way to Parliament buildings and to be precise, the National Assembly, so that he can deliver that crucial budget that every Kenyan has been waiting for. But to the controversial issue, so to speak, is the finance bill. And I'm not alone. I'm with the Member of Parliament from Mbeere North, Geoffrey Roko, who will help me in terms of trying to understand these the finance bill and maybe why, because he comes from the Kenya Kwanza regime. He'll also tell us what necessitated these or what made them come with these proposals that have seen majority of Kenyans, or let me say a good number of Kenyans, really come out and say that maybe it is time that the Kenya Kwanza government relaxes on the high taxation. Mheshimiwa Roko, welcome to KTN News. And I'll go just direct to the question. Yesterday there was a vote. Where did you vote? Did you vote yes or no, and maybe why?
Thank you, Chris. I voted yes. And I voted yes because, Chris, I have spent 6 years in School of Business, Finance and Economics. And also I have spent another 2 years in School of International Relations and Diplomacy, and I clearly understand what we need to do as a nation so that we can change our economic status, and it is possible to change the economic status of our country in a short period of 10 years from where we are today to a country almost close to Singapore, close to Malaysia and other Asian tigers we talk about. The measures which are required to be taken place for us to move from our status at the moment are some of them which have been outlined clearly in the finance bill, and it has also been well aligned with the budget which is going to be done today in the afternoon. For instance, we need to ensure the value chain process of the product which we produce in Kenya are well aligned from the production to value addition to export. That has to be properly aligned. It is something which has not been done in the past, but this finance bill and the budget is trying to address that issue. For instance, I may ask one question, that in 1990s, the export of pyrethrum from Kenya to other nations which use pyrethrum was about 80%. Today is 2%. What happened? What is the demand of pyrethrum within the world, within the economies of the world? The demand is quite high. We are a country which can produce pyrethrum. This can bring in quite a lot of income. Foreign exchange, which we are complaining that the sharing is getting a lot of beating against dollar. So what are these measures we need to do? These are some of the things which have been addressed by the finance bill and the budget, and is for the benefit of our economy. We must move from the point where we are used to things, the status quo.
But Mheshimiwa, if I will allow me to cut you short, even yes, as you talk and support the taxation, someone out there might ask, is there a framework that will ensure that even as Kenyans are taxed, that this money will be put into good use? Because people have talked about the wastage, the high wastage that they've seen even in this regime. They've talked about the corruption. It's just the other day we were talking about KEMSA. So someone will ask, are they sure even that this 1.5% that will be deducted, and now it's from it's moved from a levy, now it's a tax? How are we going to? How are Kenyans going to be assured that their money is safe?
That's Chris. That's why I've come with the anti-corruption and economic crime amendment bill, because we need to amend their corruption laws. We align them properly so that they can be efficient, effective, and clear, so that when someone is involved in corruption activities, that person or that group of people, whoever the cartels, they are properly dealt with within the shortest time possible. Taxpayers' money must be used in good use, must be properly used. It is true that we have experienced economic crimes in this country, economic crimes which have not been prosecuted. We must align the Anti-Corruption Authority. We must ensure it is capable of dealing with economic crimes. At the moment, the Anti-Corruption Authority is not dealing with economic crimes. It is dealing with procurement-related crimes, which also are extremely bad. But most cases are lost in courts. Most cases, people go scot-free. I got a report yesterday, 2018-2019, about 9,000 and some 100 cases were reported to anti-corruption. Out of all those, only 6 cases were prosecuted successfully. Can you imagine, from 9,100 and something to only 6 cases? So we must align the anti-corruption laws properly to make them efficient, effective. The investigation.
But does it mean we don't have enough laws to fight corruption in this country?
We have sections of the Anti-Corruption Authority, Anti-Corruption and Crime Act, Economic Crime Act, which negates the rate and intent of fighting the corruption. And those sections need to be repealed with immediate effect. Section 45, 2B and C of the Anti-Corruption Authority, they negate the spirit of Public Procurement and Disposal Act of 2015. They also negate the spirit and the intent of Public Procurement Regulatory Authority Act, which are post-2010 Constitution. But this act, which established Anti-Corruption Authority, is an act of 203, which is pre-Constitution 2010. So we need to do some alignment so that we can be able to fight corruption in a proper manner.
But Mheshimiwa, from the look of things and the plan that you've correctly elaborated, it looks like a long-term thing. What do you do? Are there any short-term measures so that someone who is going to, someone who lives less than $1 a day and going to the supermarket, to the shop, can get the essential commodities? The prices have been lowered, and you'll answer these entwined with the question that the fuel levy now has moved from 8% to 16%. That definitely means that everything that uses fuel and diesel in terms of production, of course, goes up automatically.
Chris, before the fuel levy went to, or the VAT on fuel went to 8%, it was at 16%. And from the time the past regime moved the fuel levy from 16% to 8%, fuel prices have always been going up. So we need to ask ourselves, why was from 16% to 8%, but the prices of fuel still went up and up gradually and slowly, continuously, in a gradual manner? It is because the decrease from 16% to 8% by the past regime was not meant to lower the prices of the fuel. It was meant to serve the cartels in oil marketing space. And the last regime had a lot of interest in petroleum product. They are key players. They even have companies in that space, and therefore they colluded within the market. They constructed policies to distort the market so that they can share the difference of 8% among themselves. That is economic crime. We need them to be investigated. We need them to be prosecuted.
Tell us about these short-term measures that you've put, even for your constituent down there in Mbeere North, that will ensure that all these is catered for and that the prices of essential commodities come down.
The essential commodities will come down once we increase production. Before, the regime which was there used to subsidize and to invest too much money in consumption. This budget, this finance bill is investing in production of agricultural products, in production, the manufacturing section, the manufacturing sector. A lot of investment is going there. And once we have enough produce, once we have more production than the demand, then the prices will definitely come down. And what I can tell Kenyans is that we expect the prices of many commodities to stabilize. We don't have any, not even a single reason why we should be importing cooking oil or end-up oils from Indonesia. We can be able to produce, to manufacture end-up oils locally here in Kenya. So once we are able to build that capacity of producing some of those essential oil, some of the basic commodities here, for instance, we are saying we have to increase the production and invest in the production of sugarcane, so that we can have enough sugar within our nation.
Right, the discussion in Parliament must go on. Chris Sairu there, but we're getting back to him. Let's get a perspective now from our very own Emmanuel Tor, who is also on the other side of Parliament. Emmanuel, what are you learning from the members of Parliament, apart from the vote they took yesterday? Perhaps they know what's happening next week?
Well, thank you very much, Ken. It is becoming a busy day here in Parliament, and from the other end, we're also having more discussions about the budget, and what we expect to be tabled this afternoon is about 3.6 trillion shillings budget that we expect to have a lot of conversations across the country. And I'm joined by one of the members of the finance of the budget committee, who is also very critical in the discussions that they had in coming up with the budget. That is Florence Jematia, who is the woman rep for Baringo County. Mheshimiwa, sorry for keeping you long, for waiting for long. Just tell us, how did you come up with the 3.6 trillion shillings, and what was going through the committee when they decided that they're going to take the ceiling higher?
Thank you so much. First of all, I want to agree that I am one of the members of the Budget Appropriation Committee. We sat for 21 probably days, and we were appropriating the 3.6 plus trillion according to the request and the bottom-up approach of government of William Ruto. What came out very clearly is that the government of the day were so keen in appropriating more monies to productivity, to give an essence of production at the expense of expenditure. We appropriated a lot of money, especially in, like for instance, agriculture. We did a lot of it in, zero rating, fertilizers, import of goods. That is, that enables the growth of the economy. We also injected a lot of it in as part of the wide base of taxation in content creation, YouTubes and all those kind of things. And this is, but we also tolerated and gave it to lower than 5%. And that is going to give us a lot of room for everyone who is able to do business wherever they are in the country, especially because of the presence of a lot of mobile, access and digital presence. It is going to give Kenyans an opportunity to make their money wherever they are. Another thing is farming. Also in farming is fishing, for instance. We want to grow most of the fish, and we have enabled. We have injected a lot of money to enable the farming, fishing farming, to be domiciled more in Kenya. As you are aware, we always import a lot of fish from China and other parts of it. But this time around, we want to export our fish, and we want to grow more especially from the lakes and oceans and that kind of thing. We even did a survey to know how many fish within our borders, probably especially in the ocean, and we did something called allocate money to something called something trotting. It is in the fishing industry that is going to enable us to understand at one point how many fish are we going to have in our sea. We also did a lot of it in terms of zero rate levy in building materials, cement, roads, steel, so that we are able to get a fast-hand industrialization growth in our industrial setup. We are also looking at, in this budget, how Kenyans can access education by putting a lot of money in JSS and enabling the growth of CBC, which is a new thing in our system that is going to give our children a better future because of the access and proper access of education is what we're going to do.
Okay. So, Mheshimiwa, before I let you go, the 16% VAT on fuel is still there, and it is going to really have a ripple effect in terms of what Kenyans are going to buy. Why didn't you just leave it at 8% or bring it to 10%?
The 8% was actually a subsidy that was introduced by the former President Uhuru Kenyatta. And this means if you're an OTS importer, like the rubies, the high-end importers, through OTS, that is Open Tender System of Government, what used to happen is 16% is there, but 8% was a levy that the government was subsidizing. But this time around, the government is taking the 8%, and if you are participating in OTS, you pay the 16%, and it is controlled by the market. The 8% that was removed is taken back to the same government that is now going to take care of the other things like the free education and fertilizers and all those kind of things. So it is the same thing. It is just changing the goal. Yes.
Thank you so much. Thank you. That is Florence Jematia, a member of the Budget Committee and, of course, a woman representative for Baringo County. We are pressed for time, but I'll be handing over to my colleague Calvin Nyakundi, who is at the steps of Treasury offices to give us more from the other end. Over to you, Nyakundi.
All right, thank you, Emmanuel Tor. And of course, as you mentioned, Kelvin Nyakundi is at Treasury Buildings, and that's the center of activities. That's where the Treasury Cabinet Secretary and the whole team are walking to Parliament or driving to Parliament. Let's see if we can get him now. Kelvin Nyakundi, if you can hear me, how far are the preparations? Is he ready? And what time do you expect him to leave?
To you live from the Treasury Buildings right here in the CBD, and a couple of minutes from now we're going to just wait and see the CS Treasury in Njuguna Ndung'u walking down the stairs and holding the black briefcase just to show us that the budget is ready they're going to now travel just a few maybe meters away to Parliament. And remember, some things to remember: this is the first budget under the Kenya Kwanza administration, 3.6 trillion shillings, and it is a little bit much from the last one, which was 3.39 trillion shillings, which is almost 251 billion shillings increase. And this is coming at a time when the economy is at a crunch in the country, and Kenyans who are camping outside here just to wait for the CS to just step down the stairs. And right now I'm going to be joined by one of the Kenyans who is standing out here. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
All right. Tuambie majina yako na your expectations today.
I am Vincent Mutu. My expectation is a reduction of cost of living. Yes, it's high, but we expect basic commodities to at least come to a level where Kenyans can be able to afford. Yeah.
All right. And when we look at the proposals that have been made, the allocations that have been made, is this budget speaking to the common mwananchi?
in a way, it's speaking to a common mwananchi, because common mwananchi, even we are not in salary. The people who are affected most are employed. On this, we can say at least common mwananchi will benefit in a way. It has been many years where common mwananchi is only one is taxed. Yeah.
All right, and also as we are also waiting for this momentous occasion where the budget is going to be read, when you look at the economy where we are as a country, first of all, ningependa kujua if you are a person, mtu wa jua kali, ama you are employed, so that at least we see how this conversation will go. So, are you a jua kali person or are you employed?
A jua kali person. Asra amahoka here. Yeah.
And what do you expect? Do you think that the budget has really spoken to the hustler person, the person who is at the lower cadre of the economy?
I'm expecting the way Mr. President promised us during campaigns is exactly what is in budget, because we had an agreement. We agreed this is our budget. So I'm expecting us focus here, we'll be able to feel the budget directly. Yeah.
All right, thank you so much for joining us. All right, there you have it, Ken. Expectations from Kenyans, positive expectations. And we've been also, during the day, I've been talking to some Kenyans who are saying they're expecting this to just make sure that at least the budget speaks to their pocket as far. For right now, we're just waiting for the CS, and just back to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Kelvin Nyakundi, reporting from the Treasury buildings.